They said the market would set us free. What they didn't mention was that freedom came with a price tag, and only billionaires could afford it. The system we live in today, a world where a handful of people can buy influence, bend laws, and outspend entire nations, wasn't an accident. It was built, not in Silicon Valley or on Wall Street, but in the offices of two politicians who promised to save the world from chaos, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. To understand how they created the billionaire world order, you have to go back to the late 1970s, to an era of economic panic. Britain was the sick man of Europe. Inflation hit 25%. Labor unions could shut down entire industries overnight. In America, oil prices quadrupled. Interest rates shot above 20%, and the word stagflation haunted every policymaker like a ghost. The old post-war consensus, where governments spent freely, managed prices, and kept unemployment low, was collapsing. The public wanted order. Markets wanted liberation. That's when, thousands of miles apart, two leaders found the same answer in the same book: free market fundamentalism. They read Milton Friedman, the Chicago school economist who believed government intervention was the virus and markets were the cure. His logic was simple: if you let prices float and competition run wild, the market would fix itself. The invisible hand would guide resources to their most efficient use. It sounded elegant, clean, and scientific. The only problem was, it was also a fantasy. When Thatcher took power in 1979, she didn't just trim spending, she detonated the British economy to prove a point. Her first budget slashed public investment and raised interest rates, triggering a brutal recession. Unemployment doubled. Entire manufacturing towns went dark. But to her, that wasn't failure. That was purification. She called inflation the destroyer of nations and believed pain was the price of discipline. Meanwhile, in Washington, Reagan was selling the same medicine with a Hollywood smile. In 1981, he dropped the top income tax rate from 70% to 50%. By 1986, it was down to 28%. He said it would trickle down. It didn't. It flooded upward. The richest 1% saw their share of national income nearly double in less than a decade. Corporate taxes fell, unions weakened, and for the first time since the Great Depression, the middle class began shrinking, quietly, statistically, and permanently. Both leaders declared war on labor. When British coal miners went on strike in 1984, Thatcher crushed them, literally. She stockpiled coal, deployed thousands of police, and broke the National Union of Mine Workers after a year-long standoff. In the U.S., Reagan faced a strike by air traffic controllers and fired 11,000 workers overnight. The message to every worker in the Western world was clear: you can be replaced. And they were. Governments called it modernization. Economists called it flexibility. But it was something more profound: a transfer of power. Before Thatcher and Reagan, labor could bargain with capital. After them, capital dictated terms. Wages stopped tracking productivity. Job security evaporated. And speculation, not production, became the engine of growth. They also believed the private sector could do everything better than the state. So Thatcher started selling Britain off piece by piece. British Telecom, British Gas, British Airways, all privatized. She even sold off social housing through her famous right to buy scheme. Millions of families bought their homes, a short-term feel-good success. But decades later, those same homes became the core of a landlord economy, fueling a housing crisis Britain still hasn't escaped. Reagan followed suit, deregulating airlines, trucking, telecoms, and finance. He championed the Garn-St. Germain Act in 1982, allowing savings and loans to speculate freely. Within a decade, that freedom cost taxpayers over $100 billion when the industry imploded. They said they were liberating the market. In reality, they were deregulating consequences, and the financial sector took notice. London's Big Bang in 1986 wiped away decades of restrictions on banks and brokers. Overnight, the city became a global casino. On Wall Street, junk bonds and leveraged buyouts turned corporate rating into a business model. This was the new economy: fast money, low taxes, and no accountability. By the end of the 1980s, the age of the industrial tycoon had ended, and the age of the financial billionaire had begun. But Thatcher and Reagan weren't just changing economies, they were changing minds. Thatcher famously said, "Economics are the method, the object is to change the soul." She didn't just want lower inflation, she wanted a new kind of citizen: competitive, self-reliant, suspicious of government, and obedient to the market. Reagan sold the same creed with a grin. Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. The irony is that both leaders used massive state power to enforce their so-called free markets. They didn't free markets from politics. They made markets the politics. This is the part of the story usually left out of textbooks. The reforms weren't random. They were engineered, step by step, law by law, to shift wealth from labor to capital, and then protect that capital from ever being taxed or challenged again. And the irony is, the first true laboratory for this free market freedom wasn't democratic at all. It was Chile. After General Pinochet's coup in 1973, Chile became the laboratory for the same Chicago school ideology that would later dominate London and Washington. The Chicago boys, trained by Milton Friedman, applied the blueprint with military precision. They privatized everything. Inflation fell, investment rose, and inequality exploded. To make the reforms stick, dissent had to be crushed, unions outlawed, protests banned. The same ideology Thatcher and Reagan would later celebrate as the triumph of liberty was first tested in a country that had none. The true genius of this revolution wasn't economic, it was psychological. They convinced people that collective security was weakness and individual risk was freedom. You weren't exploited, you were self-employed. They branded survival. And the United States became the ultimate proof of concept for what happens when you replace a welfare state with a credit system. Every other rich nation built safety nets. America built payment plans. In Britain, France, or Japan, if you get cancer, you get treatment. In America, you get a bill. In Denmark, if you lose your job, unemployment insurance replaces 90% of your income. In America, it barely covers 40%. The myth of American freedom hides a brutal truth. You aren't free from the system, you are free to owe it. Medical debt replaced healthcare. Student loans replaced education. Credit cards replaced living wages. This is the hidden cost of the Reagan-Thatcher world. Insecurity sold as liberty. They told people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, then outsourced the boot factory to China. By the 2000s, the system had gone global. Corporations moved faster than governments. Money moved faster than laws. Tax havens multiplied. In 2008, the financial sector had become a parallel state, capable of crashing the global economy and sending the bill to taxpayers. Under capitalism, when things go wrong, costs are socialized. When things go right, profits are privatized. That formula is Thatcher and Reagan's true legacy. Look at the world they left behind. In 1980, there were fewer than 50 billionaires. Today, there are over 2,600. Their combined wealth exceeds $14 trillion. They are no longer citizens of nations. They are nations themselves. The logic of the 1980s still runs everything. Cut taxes to incentivize growth. Deregulate to spur innovation. Privatize to save efficiency. Same script, updated with new buzzwords. Innovation, disruption, efficiency. Different packaging, same scam. Because the game hasn't changed. Only the scale has. Today, the richest men can move markets with a tweet and paralyze governments. The old powers, kings, parliaments, still exist, but they operate inside an economy they don't control. When billionaires have balance sheets bigger than countries, free markets stop being markets. They become arenas of private power. The cruel symmetry of history is this. Thatcher and Reagan claimed they were saving capitalism from itself. They were half right. Capitalism survived, but democracy didn't emerge unscathed. They promised to make the state smaller, but what they really made smaller was your share of the future. History doesn't repeat, but it compounds like interest. And if you don't understand how this world was built, you will spend your life working inside it, wondering why you can never get ahead while someone else gets richer in their sleep.
If what I shared today helped you see the world from a different perspective, don't forget to subscribe. Because history always has an answer. You just need to look from the right angle.